Lifestyle.
What was a lot? What was
Secret society.
I can't say no better than that.
That's
you know
it.
What I'm trying to say?
Can we get a big woo in the room?
Three men are behind bars in the murder of rapper Pop Smoke. They're also linked to the September murder of 18-year-old Cameron Stone at the Rose Bowl parking lot.
The up-and-coming rapper ambushed in a posh Hollywood Hills home early Wednesday morning. The 911 call came from someone on the East Coast who had apparently been told what happened.
What they saying happened? He posted an address, or this, or that.
In Cali, you gotta have your guns out, bro. That's where everybody get robbed at. That's where everybody get jacked at. That's where the home invasion's going on at. You know, they looking for rappers. They gonna get you, dog. They about their business out there.
Alright, we gotta talk about the Pop Smoke situation. There was a lot of theories floating around about what exactly happened. People thought it was some GDs from Brooklyn who traveled all the way down to LA, went to Mount Olympus, where Pop Smoke was staying at, and shot him in the escalation of the Wu versus Cho war that's going on in Brooklyn and elsewhere in New York City. Some people said it was an inside job set up by his best friend or his manager. People were running with this story that the owner of the Wraith that Pop Smoke allegedly took out of state without permission, that the owner ordered a hit on Pop Smoke as retaliation. All of this is nonsense. None of this is true. The people who killed Pop Smoke were Hoover criminals, and they're from the notorious Hoover Street in South Central LA. Hoover criminals are the most hated gang in LA by far, and that's no disrespect. They would probably admit that themselves. They got a lot of enemies. But little by little, detectives started to piece together the clues linking these Hoover kids to a bunch of other shit, including murder and home robberies in the Hollywood Hills and north of Pasadena. And one of the dudes who filmed himself in LAPD custody getting arrested for Pop Smoke's homicide was literally giving himself away on Instagram. But it goes even deeper than this. We know that Gucci Mane recently signed Pop Smoke's direct ops from New York to his label 1017.
We knocking meat out his taco, and if you get money, then why you condone the same shit that got Pop Smoke? And I just find it funny.
The war in between the Woos and the Chos has been escalating. Now we're gonna get into all this, but before we do, check out my song of the day. This is my guy Oreo J. Let's go.
Oh, summer, summer, summer. Blacked out like Bruce Wayne. Top off, so she calling it a toupee. Shoot shots, let me playing on 2K. Two-faced if I catch her in the mood swing. Yeah, we ride it all summer, summer, summer. Yeah, we ride it all summer, summer, summer.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're my new babe. Girl, I love the way your body's moving. Always at my yard, girl, just moving. But hate to see us winning, never losing. Girl, you ain't like no other.
Alright, in order to understand this story, we gotta go to South Central LA, to Hoover Street. This is a long street from north to south, and is sandwiched in between a bunch of other hoods in South Central LA. And historically, the Hoovers began as a Crip faction in the 70s and 80s until this internal war broke out, and the Hoovers started breaking away from the Crip alliance. Now, they started beefing with Crip factions like the Rolling 60s, which is where Nipsey Hussle is from, the Rolling 40s, the Rolling 30s, the 90s, the 100s, the 50s, etc. Now the Hoovers beef with both Bloods and Crips, and as a result, they become the most hated gang in LA since the late 90s, right? Everybody hates them. And in order to stand out, they gotta be super violent, they gotta be extra reckless, and they also adopted orange colors to distinguish themselves. They changed the C from Hoover Crips to Hoover Criminals, and one of, if not the only Hoover set that remained Crip is the 5 Deuce Hoover Crips that even exported outside of LA, and you'll see them in places like Dallas or Houston with Maxo Cream. Now, fast forward 6 months after Pop Smoke's death. There was no leads, no witnesses, people were not talking, and Corona was effing up the investigation. The police couldn't conduct any interviews. It jammed their whole shit up. Then, all of a sudden, a week ago, the LAPD announces they got Pop Smoke's killers. And one of them, when he got arrested, filmed himself in the squad car in the interrogation room. It got posted all through social media. People found his Instagram profile. He basically doxed himself and his co-defendants. That's what happens when you put all your info out there. People find your address. And if you check out his Instagram bio, he's got all the O's crossed out. Since Hoovers beef with all the O's, like the Rolling 60s, 40s, 30s, 90s, 100s, etc. The Hoovers cross out O's in their language. That's how you know that person is Hoover. They also put K's next to B's and C's to signify blood and Crip killer. And since the Hoovers beef with almost all Crip factions, that includes all of the East Coast Crips, and Pop Smoke is an East Coast Crip from Brooklyn. Another obvious sign is this kid is wearing orange in a lot of his photos. And what's super interesting is when 6ix9ine came from New York to LA with Shotty and the 9 Trey Bloods, they paid for Hoover protection. They had a bunch of Hoover people with them. Now, what's interesting is we're learning that these Hoover kids who killed Pop Smoke had a history of being super active. In September of 2019, they got into a fight at the Rose Bowl and shot and killed a kid in a parking lot who was just trying to break up the fight, right? His name was Cameron. This is a kid who was going to real estate school. He had a promising future. Boom, they killed him. 2 months later, those same Hoover kids were in a brutal high-speed car crash that they survived after pressing the gas to escape the LAPD, who was chasing them down on the highway for a string of home robberies in the upscale homes northwest of Pasadena. Now, on the freeway in Glendale, the cops decided to call off this chase because the Hoover kids were just going too fast. But the kids crashed their vehicle into an off-ramp, totaled their car, and when the police got to the wreck and arrested them, they found a shit ton of stolen jewelry in the trunk. It was a classic case of flocking, or a home robbery in LA. You got celebrities like Alanis Morissette, who got $2 million worth of jewelry stolen from her home. You got Nick Young, who used to play for the Lakers, who got the same thing done to him. LAPD recently took down this burglary ring, and they had been doing high-profile robberies. They also found a paper with a bunch of addresses and floor layouts on it. Some of their next targets were LeBron James, Matt Damon, Rihanna, and of course the gang, what did they use? They used social media to monitor when celebrities were away from their homes. They ransacked this LA Rams player's mansion while he was playing a game against the Vikings, right? They wait for you to leave, and they just infiltrate that shit. And these home robberies are a big source of revenue for a lot of gangs out of South Central LA. You look at the geography. Just to the west of all the hoods in South Central LA, it's the rich beachfront properties of Santa Monica. To the north, it's the lavish homes in the Hollywood Hills. Fast forward to February of 2020, Pop Smoke rented a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, more specifically Mount Olympus. He's only a couple people deep, maybe him and his best friend. He was updating his Instagram, posting that he's in Beverly Hills. Then, on his story, he was opening a gift, a special delivery from Amiri. We know Amiri and Pop Smoke have a great relationship. And on the gift that they gave him had the address of the mansion he was staying in, and he's filming all this on his IG story. That was all the info they needed. The Hoover criminals were watching. They saw Pop Smoke was staying at 2033 Hercules Drive, a house owned by Teddy Mellencamp. They waited until 4 in the morning thinking Pop Smoke would be asleep. It would be an easier job. The mansion was about 20 minutes away from Hoover Street. 4 Hoover criminals got there, masked up. The security alarm in the house was deactivated. 2 of them went to the back door, and right on the inside of that door is a couch. Most likely that's where Pop Smoke was sitting or lying there, whatever. When the Hoovers got inside, they started tussling with him. Allegedly, he had a gun and let off a shot, shooting one of them, and that's when the other one let off 2 shots in his torso, and Pop Smoke let out and died. We do know that the shooters then fled on foot, right? Somebody in New York called the police. That's how quick the news spread, and for 6 months it looked like the case was gonna go unsolved. But the LAPD were knocking on doors, getting video footage from civilians and businesses in the area, and they tracked the suspects all the way back to Hoover Street, where they arrested 5 people, 2 of which are still under the age of 17. Now that shit was tragic. Rest in peace to Pop Smoke, but we gotta talk about Brooklyn, cause the music is heating up. We know that Bobby Shmurda and Rowdy, they're coming back home hopefully December or earlier. They're GS9, which is woo. You know that Fabio is making waves, doing proud for Pop Smoke, except just like in Chicago, you can't mention Chief Keef without talking about Lil Jojo or FBG Duck. And it's the same in Brooklyn. On one side is the Woos, and on the other side is the Chos. Pop Smoke's direct rival just got signed to Gucci Mane, and this is a guy by the name of Coach the Ghost. Dope rapper. And it might surprise people to know that he is a gangster disciple from Brooklyn. And you might be thinking, I thought that shit was only in Chicago. See, the GDs moved from Chicago up to New York in the late 80s, early 90s, and established GD sets mainly in like Flatbush, Brownsville, Bed-Stuy, and the Chos have a huge GD element to them. This shit warrants its own video because people need to know like the history and how things are moving right now, especially with Bobby and Rowdy coming home in December. That could make things very interesting. Let me know if you guys want a full video on that. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, and I'll see you in the next video.